Hi there, I am Doreen Tannenbaum, the Strategic Initiatives and Communications Manager for the Procurement Services team. Welcome to our department buyers training session today regarding trademarks and strategic contracts. Again, we'll notify you via email sometime next week when this presentation will be recorded or will be available with the recording and our slides. Please keep your audio muted during the presentation, and if you have any questions or comments, please share it in the chat. You can find our training section filled with step-by-step instructions on the footer of the procurement.uci.edu website. You'll also find interactive courses on UCLC. And we're always available to set up one-on-one or group training sessions if you need any procurement assistance. Please contact Shauna at shauna.n@uci.edu to set that up. Now I'd like to introduce our Chief Procurement Officer, Snehal Bhatt.
Thank you, Doreen. Welcome, everybody. Hope everybody's enjoying their summer. We skipped last month because of fiscal close. I hope you all had a less stressful time during the fiscal close. I know it's a busy time of the year. So we want to start back our series of sessions with all the departmental folks to continue the trend of providing insights to some of the various topics that you run into with procurement. So again, thank you for taking the time to join this session and engage yourself in trying to learn more about different topics. Today's topic, as mentioned by Doreen, is going to be the trademarks and strategic contracts that is being run by Hung Pham, and he is going to walk you through some of the various some of the things that you need to be aware of when you are trying to make purchases that are branded. And at the end, we will provide the resources, as Doreen said. Just wanted to walk you through a couple of basic things that you need to be aware of when it comes to procurement and any kind of procurement. I tend to repeat this. So many of you who have been attending the sessions regularly probably are getting familiar with this. But we want to make sure that anybody who is new and joining for the first time is aware of some of the issues that we run into on a regular basis, where a lot of folks not being aware end up signing contracts on behalf of the university, which they do not have the delegation of authority to do so. So I wanted to make sure that everybody is reminded that the delegation of authority to sign any contracts lies with procurement services. In almost all cases, there are some exceptions, but in most cases, it's procurement services. So please make sure that you engage procurement services whenever you are trying to procure any goods or services, particularly if they are of large dollar amounts. It's also, as part of the university employees, you are required to be aware of all the various procurement policies, rules, regulations, and other executive orders that we do get from time to time. UCOP, in fact, has come up with quite a few policy changes that you all need to be familiar with and be aware of. So UCOP BUS 43 is more or less our Bible when it comes to what policies to follow for procurement. 707-10 is our UCI policy that's specific to our campus. And then, of course, there's the California Public Contracts Code that we are required to follow. And one of the key elements there is the threshold of $100,000 for any purchases that you're making. That hits that $100,000 threshold. We are supposed to be competitively bidding that product or services. I just wanted to be, repeating this just so everybody continues to be aware of those. If you purchase items that are not been approved or been authorized, it's possible that the purchases may not be reimbursed. So please be mindful and be aware of that. Okay, next slide. All right. So having said that, there's a lot more that I can talk about with regards to policy and compliance, but we're not going to spend too much time on that and give time to Hung Pham to talk about trademarks and strategic contracts. So take away, Hung.
Thanks, Nehal. I appreciate you leaving me a lot of time. I'll try to get through the 80 slides that I have here, before the end of the hour. I'm just kidding. It's not that complicated. Basically, what I want to get across to you is today how to order branded merchandise and to stay within compliance with the UC Code of Conduct as it relates to trademarked items. So there's an agenda right here. It's just like I said, I'm going to give a quick introduction to trademarks, just what it is and what's involved. I'm not going to get into the real nitty gritty because that's very heavy duty legal stuff, and that's just not what I'm good at. If you want cups and t-shirts, I'm the guy to go to, but legal advice, that's probably going to be somewhere else. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about my the UCI licensing program, what I do managing the program and administering the program, and what it's there for. And then, of course, I saved the best for the end, which is what you were all here for, which is how to actually order these items. Next slide, please. So we'll start off. I know some of you may have already heard this, so please don't yell out any answers. Oh, wait, the answer's already there. It's what is a trademark? Any word, symbol, design, or logo or slogan that identifies and distinguishes the source of one product or service from another. So essentially, the legal standard, and don't hold too much to this because, like I said, I'm not allowed to dispense any legal advice. But essentially, the trademark laws are out there to protect everybody, and the standard is whether there's a potential for consumer confusion. So oftentimes you can make a claim if you feel like your trademark is being infringed upon, and typically what that means is that you're afraid that a consumer may mistaken somebody else's item to be yours or yours to be somebody else's. Next slide, please. And here are some examples of very famous trademarks. I think during a previous run of this, perhaps maybe they're not as famous as I thought they were. I'll just go through them. I think that most of you can probably pick out what they are without even the name of the company. So the top one is Louis Vuitton. Then you've got the Michelin Man for the Michelin company that makes tires. And then there's Starbucks, of course. Everybody knows that, I'm sure. And the red hat one is actually Pizza Hut. Maybe not everybody knows this, but I put it in there for a reason. Next slide, please. Similar to other corporations, the university also has our own trademarks that are, I believe, to be very recognizable. The BC Anteater, the Stack logo, our seal, and of course, Zot. Next slide, please. And the reason why we want to protect our brand, as well as corporations want to protect their brand, is they want to avoid situations like these. Anybody want to use Arm and Hatchet for their baking soda needs? Or does anybody want to grab a cup of coffee from Sunbucks? Or order a pizza or a pita from Pita Hut? I probably wouldn't. And I feel really bad for our partner Adidas, because that looks to me like Adidas, or I can't even tell how many stripes there are. So that's some of the reasons why people are very keen, or corporations are very keen on protecting their logos. Next slide, please. One famous example is Puma, who makes shoes, as you can see here. These shoes were a very hot item. Okay, a click, please. Because it incorporated, I think most of us can tell, another company's logos. It used the famous palm trees and the colors of In-N-Out. Needless to say, In-N-Out was not very happy and immediately sent a cease and desist letter to Puma. To my dismay, they were able to do it before I could actually buy a pair of shoes. So I had to give up my dreams of being a sneaker collector. And so here I'm still at the university. Next slide, please. And similarly, we do have copycats and people who try to knock off our own various logos and symbols. I like to call these Peters the kind of Popeye Peter. I mean, gosh, he looks like he's pretty angry and had a rough life. So these are absolutely unauthorized. I don't know where they even came from, but I spend most of my days chasing after people and companies that are trying to promote these unauthorized merchandise and symbols. Next slide, please. So as part of our efforts to protect our brand, we have the licensing program. Basically, our licensing program is designed to grant permission to vendors, which we call our licensees, a license, which is just basically permission to create products with our symbols on it, such as Adidas, next one. And there's T-shirts, Hello Kitty. We've partnered up with Sanrio in the past. We have a partnership with Disney now. So there's great things to do, but there should be various controls that are placed and so that we can decide who we want to partner up with. In addition to granting authority or permission to create retail items, we also make sure that we partner up with the right vendors and licensees to create our own internal merchandise, such as shirts, cups. Here are two great examples that were produced by our local licensees, both of which I believe are certified small businesses, Guerrilla Marketing and Manhattan Stitching. And Doreen will talk a little bit more about it later on after the presentation. Next slide, please. So what is a licensee? A licensee is basically a company that specializes in creating items bearing a licensor's mark. What that really means is that the licensee is specialized in knowing how to make sure that the logos and symbols show up as best they can on the various items. For example, in the background picture there you see there's some socks with university logos on them, and they have the right colors and the symbols appear appropriately. Likewise, on our licensed items, one of the things that I do is I make sure that the symbols are appropriate, appear accurately, and abide by our branding guidelines. In addition, for UCI licensees, they're contractually bound to comply with the UC Code of Conduct. And I'll speak a little more about the UC Code of Conduct in a minute. And just a special note, not all approved or onboarded vendors are licensees. Next slide, please. So the UC Code of Conduct, in addition to requiring all students, employees, staff, faculty, to purchase any items that bear the university marks must be purchased with a license through a licensee. And part of the reason why is that all of our licensees contractually agree to produce all of the items without the use of forced slave or child labor, among other things. It also has a long list of requirements in terms of labor practices, workers' rights, and it also requires that our licensees provide transparency as to where they get their items. So it goes beyond just knowing where the T-shirt is screen printed. So if you order a shirt that says UCI on it, the last step is usually the licensee just screen printing the logo on it. What we go through and make sure is we ask them to disclose the entire supply chain all the way down to the cut and sew and where the cotton comes from. The reason why this is important is that oftentimes issues with supply chain and workers' rights and labor code violations come along with factories further up or further down the food chain, which is basically where the item starts. with harvesting of the cotton for shirts, and then you cut and sew the shirt, and then the shirt is sold as a blank to the licensee who ends up decorating it and then selling it to us. You may know one of the biggest issues recently is that many factories in China, particularly West China, are believed to be using Uyghur labor, which is a Muslim minority that resides in China. The United States government has issued a lot of regulations, and I believe Customs and Border Patrol has an order to stop items that come in from that area. This issue is one of the hot topic issues that universities like ourselves, the UC, and many other institutions are concerned about. And making sure that you purchase your items through a licensee helps us comply with these concerns, with the code, so that we can avoid these concerns. The university goes through a lot of trouble to try to make sure that we steer clear of labor code issues and workers' right issues. One of which we belong to the Fair Labor Association, and we also belong to the Worker Rights Consortium. They're both third-party nonprofit organizations that, among other things, provide guidance and rules as to how to implement fair labor practices within the manufacturing industries for apparel and other goods that typically are licensed by universities and even corporations. I actually sit on the monitoring committee for the Fair Labor Association, and we hear about cases about factory violations and issues with the supply chain. And it's been especially busy during the COVID pandemic pandemic area, because during the pandemic, there's been a lot of factories that have had to close. And what has happened is that workers who are owed pay oftentimes do not get paid that back pay. Plus, there are severance packages that were promised to them that oftentimes are not paid out. And as such, part of the responsibility for the Fair Labor Association, as well as the Worker Rights Consortium, is to find these out and try to find remediation and solutions and make those workers whole. Next slide, please. Okay, so there are common questions about our trademarks and the trademark program, one of which is what must be licensed? The simple answer is that pretty much any item that bears a universal mark probably needs to be licensed. And if you ever have any questions about it, you should feel free to reach out to me and ask. I'm happy to answer any of those questions, whether something should be licensed or not. I know that there's also another big question is, what if the item doesn't exactly have what I think is the university mark? Like, what if it says UCI, except I wrote it? Such as, if you look at the logos on the left here, those are our official font mark, but the ones on the right, somebody probably just wrote that in and created themselves. The ones on the right still need to be licensed, assuming that it's even approvable. These probably don't comply with the branding guidelines set out by Strategic Communications, and we could probably discuss that if that comes across my desk or somebody wants to print that. But needless to the short answer is, even if it doesn't follow the exact font that you see everywhere for UC Irvine, it still needs to be licensed if it says UCI or UC Irvine, as it can easily be confused by a consumer that it came from the university. Next slide, please. Now, less common items that also need to be licensed are pop-up canopies, edibles like cookies and cakes, and macarons. We had an interesting case where Honey and Butter, which is a local macaron company out in at the Spectrum, is actually an alumni-owned business, and they make great macarons. I eat there all the time. She made a BC Anteater macaron, which looked great. I mean, it's the best looking Anteater macaron I've ever seen in my life, and didn't get a chance to eat it. I kind of missed out on it, like I missed out on the shoe. But unfortunately, she has to be licensed. But it's just the licensing process does require some cost, and I think it just wasn't feasible in a business sense for her, and hence we ended up not getting her license, which is unfortunate. But that's just a tidbit of information for you. Banners such as step and repeat backdrops need to be licensed as well. Stickers and decals, yes, it needs to be licensed. I know a lot of people like to go through Sticker Mill, but Sticker Mill doesn't like to tell us where they get their stuff from or how they make their things. Again, with anything, you feel free to reach out to me and ask me whether or not something needs to be licensed. Are there any items that are exempt from licensing? Yes, there are some. I can tell you right now, specialized uniforms like the police uniforms and hospital scrubs are considered not subject to licensing for obvious reasons. Business collateral such as letterhead, business cards, and flyers are not required to be licensed. I believe Strategic Communications has set up a specific vendor to create the business cards, and letterhead is internal only business collateral that is also exempt. Marble, I'll get to your question, Marble, after I'm almost done. I know it's very exciting. I know. What if Strategic Communications has approved of your design? Can you just go produce it? You probably can get it produced the way it looks, but it still has to be produced by a licensee. And a final note, as I mentioned before, an approved vendor does not necessarily mean that they are a licensee. So even though they're approved, they may not have the rights to make that item that bears the university mark. Now, part of the licensing, going through a licensee, part of that helps you by ensuring that it's reviewed for branding compliance. Another click, please. So there's some rules out there as to how your branding should appear. For example, the order of things. If you have a school that has a donor name on it, the colors. For example, that really offending orange oval right there makes you look like Cal State Fullerton. There's some basic rules that need to be abided by, and part of the process with the license programs that we ensure that it's done properly. Another click, please. For example, these two items, they look great. And once they get sent through to the licensee, it comes to my desk. I take a look at it, and then there's some minor changes, and I just instruct the licensee what changes need to be made. Here in this instance, they need the TM designation for UCI Health, and on the face covering, there needs to be a Circle R designation for UCI. And we would get that worked out with the licensee. You won't be bothered by that after the fact, and it goes to production with the proper designations. So here's the finale here. How do you purchase the merchandise? It's real simple. First step is, and probably the most important one, is select the right licensee. The licensee list can be found at trademarks.uci.edu, and we have two lists. There's a comprehensive list as well as a local licensee list. I suggest going to the local licensee list first, because they produce actually most of all of our internal purchases, and they can probably provide you with quicker service and good pricing. But you're welcome to use any of the other licensees that are on the comprehensive list as well. We typically do not make too many changes with our licensees just because we need to have oversight, as I've mentioned, with respect to compliance with the UC Code of Conduct requirements, and such. We don't add too many people. So we update the list as needed, but oftentimes does not need to be added or updated too often. The second part is you can create your own artwork, or you can ask the licensee to help you. So if you have artwork that you already know, this is what I want, and you want that done, then you can, once you select your licensee, send it to them. They'll take a look at it. Oftentimes, especially the local licensees will already know what can be approved or what cannot be approved. And either you or the licensee will send it to me either through an email, or the licensee oftentimes will just send it through the approval portal, and I can make my comments at that point in time. If it's a little confusing for me or I don't know what the branding rules are, I contact strategic communications and we work together and make sure that it's compliant. And well, that covered step 3 as well. So that's pretty simple right there. So the key there is to select the licensee and work with your licensee, and they take care of everything on the back end. As always, you're welcome to call me and ask any questions.
Thanks, Han. So I'm going to go over the small business first policy because we've had a few questions arise in regards to license. And these are the current certified licensed vendors. These are all local vendors. And from now, we recommend utilizing these vendors for all of our promotional products until the rest of our licensees can obtain certification. Once we have more licensees go through that certification process, becoming either smaller, diverse certified businesses, then we'll send out a comprehensive list to everyone. These are some of our resources that we referred to today. Again, the slides and the video are going to be on our website and will be emailed to you either later this week or early next week. And I'm going to turn this back over to Snehal.
I think Marbell had a question. I don't know when you wanted to.
We'll get to that in just one sec. Thanks so much.
Yep.
And so we do have this survey, and I'll put the link into the chat as well.
Thank you, Doreen. Thank you, Hung, very much for this very insightful presentation on procurement of licensed products, or branded products, I should say, from licensees, or having the printing done by the licensees. I know that a lot of people probably have a lot of questions about which licensees to use. What if we have licensed products that are very unique and specific to their own needs, and want to use a licensee that's not a small business, the 4 that are listed here. Those are the exceptions that you will have to work through with Hung and with Doreen. Doreen's basically looks at a lot of the waivers that people request when they cannot, for whatever reason, use a small business for any of their spend that's between $10,000 and $250,000. So please try to work with us, because this is a new policy that's just been introduced in March of this year. And we are really trying to put some processes in place to help streamline the process. But until that happens, you do need to fill out the waiver forms that are available on our website under Small Business First policy, and need to provide specific reasons why you would not utilize a small business. Interestingly enough, over the 5 years that I've been here, from the very get-go, I have heard people saying, how come we are trying to have big suppliers be our preferred suppliers and not trying to promote local or small businesses? And now here we have a policy that's actually requiring us to try to look for small and diverse businesses. Of course, we can continue to use all of our contracted suppliers, but now a lot of people are complaining about the bureaucracy of having to sign waivers or fill out waivers because they don't want to use a small or diverse business. So it's an interesting dynamics that I'm finding, where on one hand, people ask that why are we not doing this? And on the other hand, people start complaining about why are you forcing us to use a small or diverse business? So I just wanted to lay that out, make sure that people understand that there's a balance between which way to go and what we want to promote. But we do want to obviously be inclusive and try to be supportive of our small and local businesses. So that's important. And that's one of the reasons why I am going to request that even if your purchases are under $10,000, it's a small dollar purchase, maybe you might want to consider the small and diverse businesses, certified small and diverse businesses first, before we go to anybody else to get your products that you are looking for. Let's get to the questions. I know that Laurie has asked a question in the chat. And Laurie, I will address that question after I address the questions with regards to the trademarks and purchase of licensed products, because your question is more in general and pertains to procurement as a whole. So I will answer that question. Just bear with me for a couple of minutes. Hung, what was the other question that you were asked, which I think came directly to you?
Marbell's raising her hand. So
okay, go ahead, Marbell.
Okay, thank you so much. My questions were these, if I may. Do we need to still adhere to UC Code of Conduct if these purchases are, for example, if an item does not have the UC logo or UC print language, do we still need to adhere to UC Code of Conduct? In my view, of course, I would think that yes, but I wanted to get that clarified from your perspective. Additionally, I wanted to know, do we need to request a product mock-up or proof for all printed UC items, UC printed items? In the past, I've received conflicting responses that, sometimes yes, sometimes no. I always require that from the vendor. So for now, those are my questions.
Sure. Let me try to make sure I understand your question, the first question correctly. If you're ordering an item that doesn't have, just like a blank, if you're trying to order a blank T-shirt without any university marks on it, then no, it's not. It's not. Go ahead.
Well, no, okay, it wouldn't be a blank T-shirt. It would be, for example, we work with several different affiliate programs, student programs, and they may have their own language that may not say UC Irvine. It may just say the name of their organization. So in that case, do we also need to adhere to UC, UC requirements? Which, like I said, to me, in my mind, of course, it would. I've been here 20 years. So I take that experience that I have here this long to require, if not oftentimes, more information rather than less information. So that's where that question was coming from.
Sure. It's the reason why I'm hesitating to answer is because the way my brain works is the real technical answer to your question is that the code of conduct is actually the code of conduct as it relates to trademark license items. So if it doesn't actually have a university mark, which is actually a big category and a big umbrella of symbols, items, and words, if it doesn't have any marks, then technically it's not subject to the UC Code of Conduct for trademark licensed items, because the code of conduct I'm referring to is a very specific one. The reason why it's very specific is it has very specific requirements as it relates to labor code and labor practices that no other code in the UC system has. Now, that's not to say that it's not subject to other policies such as sustainability and other procurement policies. But to answer your question as precisely as possible, if there are no bona fide marks, then it technically is not subject to the UC Code of Conduct. But I still suggest, going through, our licensees if there are any affiliated groups that are appearing on that shirt. I guess it will really depend on which group you're talking about. But
they're just, student affiliates. They may have, like an organization that they are part of, and they have multiple events that they host for students and possibly community events outside. So in some cases, I've seen that there is no UCI logo. But for me, even when you are conveying, the UC conduct or code of conduct that we want to follow, it would seem that it would apply to this type of purchase as well, because even though it does not have a UC logo, we still want to support the, the fairness in how the product is being created, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I always promote using the licensee just because those are only the vendors that I work with directly because I have oversight as to their compliance. I work with them as to what blanks can and cannot be used for our internal purchases. Because it really is following the blanks and following further down. Because I know where for example, like Manhattan Stitching, they screen their shirts over in Buena Park. So I mean, I know the owner, and it's a small shop, so I know the people that work in it. So I'm not entirely concerned about their labor practices in that shop. It's the blanks, it's the garments, the undecorated garments that I'm concerned about as to where they came from. So if you're ever able to use a licensee to meet your needs, even if there isn't a specific logo on it, then all the better. But I don't think the university is as specific for items that are not bearing university marks. Now, what's your second question, Marva? In my pandemic brain, I can't remember what your second question was. Could you repeat that for me?
Yes, absolutely. So, for example, when we're purchasing promotional items such as T-shirts, bottles or whatever, squishies, whatever we're purchasing, I always request that we obtain a mock or proof. So sometimes, from procurement, sometimes I've been told that yes, we need it, sometimes we don't. So it's a consensus that is it needed or not? But I think that it should be needed because you get to approve that proof of what is being printed ahead of time, rather than get the product and then, have even procurement or people at your end saying, this is not a product that we should have approved to begin with.
Yeah, if it comes, as it relates to trademarked items, yeah, that's just part of the process. So there should be a mock-up regardless of whether or not you request it. So if you're going through a licensee because the item has a mark on it, the licensee is required to send that artwork proof to me, because that's what I base my approval on. Because I'll take a look at it and the colors have to match exactly what our color standards are, and the symbols have to be set within the bounds set by strategic communications. And I want to make sure things are spelled correctly. Sometimes there's a lot of typos. I've had a shirt that said anteaters without the T, and the students were trying to buy all of them up, and I had to run to the store and get them off the shelves because about 5 sets of eyes didn't see them. So yeah, no, we usually see the mock-ups. We have to see the mock-ups, otherwise I can't approve it. But that's not to say that when you buy something that doesn't have a university mark, or if you're buying it from a non-licensee, non-licensees are not going to send that to me because I have no idea. They're not obligated to, and they don't have access to the approval portal to have me approved. I don't know if that answers your questions.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much. I just want to make sure that I am conveying the correct information to the team I support, so that when you are at your end approving the expenses that we're processing, that the packets that we are submitting are complete, and that I'm also requesting information that I can say, well, no, accounting says that we require this information.
And Maribel, if I can just chime in, it's best practices to ask for a mock-up. With any vendor that you're requesting a promotional item. Ideally, we would really prefer for you to go through our certified small businesses, because they have a really great working relationship with us and know that everything that does get ordered through them needs to get across Hung's desk for approval. But just like a statement of work, that is your statement of work in a sense, right? So you always want to include that and have that, for your own reference. I've seen instances where they have done the artwork upside down on accident, and that's not what we had originally asked for. So it's always to your best interest to ask for that. We have a couple of more questions coming in. Suzanne asked if an event has multiple universities on a T-shirt.
Yeah, that's a good question, Suzanne. Basically, the universities, if they have a licensing agreement and a licensing agent, each university will have to approve that T-shirt. And typically, if you go through a licensee, they can handle that and they can figure out who they need to send it to. I approve, or I get requests to approve plenty of T-shirts where there are multiple universities on it. In fact, I have one on my mind right now, which there was it was the us and USC. USC is a special case for me because I went to UCLA for law school, and I'm an alum here, so I mean I'm an anteater, so don't forget that. But yeah, so that's something that is handled separately by each school's licensing director for approval. But the licensee should know how to get those approved.
Does anyone have any other questions pertaining to trademarks or licensing?
Oh, I knew Kat was going to heckle me.
So let me read it out loud first. How do the university sustainability initiatives affect the items that we should order? For example, shopping bags.
I will
Really?
answer that. You have to follow both policies.
And
Right,
you know, we do have
Yeah.
a single-use plastic policy that we're going to introduce next month for our next training session. So it will kind of cover some of the questions that you have for us. I have a feeling. So we'll go over that in our next training session.
Yeah, essentially, sometimes you do have to have multiple policies that you need to comply by. So, you know, if it needs to be sustainable, then you need to do that along with using the licensee, along with making sure that the trademark, that the logos meet our standards and requirements. So that's the way you need to look at this is, you know, there, hopefully we'll have very few instances when there's a conflicting requirement where one policy contradicts the other. Hopefully we won't run into too many of those, but that also happens every so often, and we just have to then work through those nuances. But yeah, you got to work through all.
One more question. If we go through a licensee, will they automatically send to approve?
And that's the big benefit of going through a licensee. Yeah, they will send it to me for approval. You don't actually have to do anything other than work out, hey, this is the final design I like, and they'll likely show you, hey, is this what you want? Because we'll send it for approval. And then once you agree with them that, yeah, let's send that over for approval. They take care of everything, and it comes to my desk. If there are any adjustments that need to be made, it's usually just very small adjustments, like adding the R or the TM, depending on what mark it is. And if there's a major issue with the design, then oftentimes I will just email you directly and ask, or discuss that. But yeah, that's a big advantage for using the licensee. They know what pathway to go.
Hunk's pretty tough on them. If they forget to do that, he gets on their case quite a bit. So
yeah, because if all of a sudden I don't hear from them, I'm like, I know you're selling stuff. Where'd you go? Yeah. So yeah,
Hunk keeps on top of them. So
I don't see any other questions coming in. So I think you can address Lorianne's question of, do we need to send agreements pertaining to event venues and F&B to procurement as well?
Yeah, so so this is outside the procurement or the trademarks realm, but since you asked the question and we have almost 80 participants here, maybe worth for them to know as well. Interestingly enough, we actually had a meeting with the travel and reimbursement department very recently and had a conversation about this with them, because we have run into the issues recently, especially during the pandemic, when departments had signed agreements for events and with hotels, and they wanted to cancel the event, and they were having a hard time backing out of the contract with the hotel because they had a signed contract. And if you don't have any force majeure language in the contract, you are stuck with it and you may lose your money. So we met with travel and reimbursement folks to understand what the process should be. And according to them, what they look for is that the expense actually is falling under the policy and meets the policy requirements, which is from BUS 79. But the fact is that we are expecting to receive some services from the hotel for utilizing their space. And the general consensus was that that does fall under the BUS 43. And so, yes, if you want to plan events and want us to review, or if you are going to sign any contracts with any hotels or other venues, you should be sending the contracts to procurement services, the contracts team. You can send it to contracts@uci.edu. And they would help review the contract to make sure that there's nothing in there that's going to create a risk for the university. Just to give an example, we did have a situation a year or two ago when the department wanted to use a local hotel, and their contract really was basically washing their hands off of any liability or indemnification, even if there was an injury or death to our employee because of a fault of theirs, and that was absolutely unacceptable to us. So we actually had to have the department not use that venue and go somewhere else for that event. So it's in the best interest of the departments to actually run some of these agreements through procurement services, just to make sure that we are, as a university, are protected and that we don't run into any risk, undue risk that we shouldn't be taking. So that answers the question, Lori. I hope that helps answer your question, the first part of it. Food and beverages, we would expect that you would actually get the food and beverages from contracted suppliers that we have, Aramark or Pepsi. If you're going to buy something from your local stores, Costco's and Albertsons, obviously, there's no contract in place. It's just a purchase, and if there's just a direct purchase, you don't need to come to procurement. Does that answer your question, Lori?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very, very much.
You're most welcome.
Okay, I don't see any other questions, so I'd like to thank everyone for joining, and if you can still fill out that survey that's in the chat there. And Snehal, any closing remarks for us?
Nope, I just want to thank everyone again for taking the time from your busy schedules to attend this session. We certainly hope you find these to be valuable and helpful. That's the reason why we're asking for you to respond on the survey, so that whatever improvements we need to make to this, we can make those. And if there's any topics that you would like us to talk about or discuss or share that you think will be beneficial to the rest of the campus, please provide your inputs and let us know what are the topics that you would like us to talk about and share in the upcoming sessions, and we'll be more than happy to address those. We do have quite a few things coming up, actually. We have talked about, and I'll just mention this, we have talked about contracting out for covered services, and we had a session on that last year, or was it earlier this year? I don't remember. But that's another hot topic that needs more discussions, and if need be, if you think there's a need, we can revisit that and try to clarify some of the concerns or questions that the campus may have. So just throwing out some ideas. If you want to hear more about some specific policies or processes, we'll be happy to work with you. So I guess there are a couple of questions, Doreen.
Yes. What is the turnaround for these contracts, given the venues have signature deadlines?
Yeah, so that's a good question. In fact, we're wondering about that, now that we are letting the departments know that they should route it through us, what's going to be that workload and how much more contracts we'll be reviewing, how many more contracts we'll be reviewing. So our teams, Andrew, you want to answer that question other than me answering it for you?
Well, I think the turnaround time is going to depend on how much information you can provide to us at the outset, right? If we have to come back and ask you all sorts of questions, what we need to know is, what is the event? Give us a general description, who's going to attend, whether that's going to be just purely faculty and staff, whether UCI students will be there, or whether there will be invited guests and non-UCI participants. Other things like if you're going to be hiring outside vendors, if you were going to have something at a local park and be bringing blow-ups, the bounce houses or other attractions or other things like that, we would need to know what those activities are. So the more information you can give us at the outset, the better. Again, also things like whether alcohol will be served at the event, whether you've already coordinated with the other departments such as dining services on that alcohol issue, or EH&S if there's a safety issue that needs to be reviewed. letting us know as much information at the outset will help us get it back to you quickly.
Right. To Andrew's point, sometimes we do need to reach out to risk services as well. If there is alcohol involved, or if there is this, like as I mentioned, indemnification and liability concerns that are one-sided, and the venues are, really not being, collaborative, then we need to involve other parties to review and discuss as well. So that could take some time. But if everything is provided and it's straightforward, and we have all the necessary information, the turnaround time should not be very long. Andrew, you would say you can actually turn it around in a couple of weeks at the most?
Yeah, I mean, a few days we could even do. Again, it's all depending on the circumstances. The more time you give us, though, the better, right? If we say we need a few days, don't wait right until the last minute, then you need the signature, right? It's absolutely 100% okay to get something done early and ahead of schedule, right? So the more time you give us, the more likely we won't be rushed and have to, put in a quick effort to it.
Right. And if it's a quick turnaround and for some reason it's a last minute urgent thing, we do try to work with the departments and try to reprioritize our workload to accommodate your needs. But the more time you give us, the better it is, and better it is for everybody. So
yeah, the thing I'd encourage everyone to remember is we are a large university, and our team is not just sitting around waiting for people to send stuff in. We have daily work comes in from KFS. We have daily work that comes in from sales and service, daily work that comes in from non-purchase contracts. So we are busy. We are always happy to help, but trust me when I say that we are not just waiting for work.
thank you, Marvell. Our team's a great team. So thank you for shout outs. Appreciate that. Anything else we can answer? We have 5 minutes left. If not, thank you again. Appreciate your time. Have a good rest of the day in the week, and we'll see you next month.